big story at this hour. The aviation regulator, the DGCA, has said that it has ordered a probe into a lapse after an empty Air India plane flying from Delhi to Moscow to bring back stranded Indians under the Vande Bharat mission returned midway when the pilot was found infected with coronavirus. Let's go across to Vishnu Som for more on this. Vishnu, at a time when the government has opened up the skies after a 2-month lockdown to domestic flights and people are struggling with whether or not to fly, is it safe, or is the government taking the right precautions? This story is coming in. What are the details? Why has the DGCA ordered a probe?
So, Sarah, in one word, oversight. That's exactly what has happened. Basically, this was an empty Air India A320neo aircraft. It was a ferry flight from Delhi to Moscow. As part of the Vande Bharat scheme, it was supposed to pick up passengers in Moscow. Every single Air India crew member does COVID tests. If they test COVID positive, then obviously they are quarantined and treated. But in this particular case, in just Delhi alone, there are 200 tests every day. There was an oversight, and the results come back to the airline centrally from the testing agency. So there was a mistake, and this pilot was allowed to proceed on the flight. Once he was on the flight, they realized that, oh no, look, there's a mistake that's been made. The aircraft by that time was already over Uzbek airspace. So then it returned, and the Director General of Civil Aviation has ordered an inquiry, but our DGCA sources telling us that prima facie this appeared to be a mistake. Fortunately, there were no passengers on this flight.
No, Vishnu, fortunately, no passengers on flight. But what does this mean then for the crew? Because isn't it also putting the crew at risk?
Yeah, absolutely. And therefore, the crew are being quarantined and they'll be tested further to see if they picked up the infection. That the pilot and the co-pilot, whichever one of the two has tested positive, one of the two. And obviously, all the cabin crew members on board, whoever came in close contact with the pilot. But do remember that all of these, one would have to see what exactly happened. I would assume that at the very least, all of these cabin crew members were wearing face masks. If there are passengers on board, then they wear an entire PPE kit. But I'm not sure they would have been doing that since this was a ferry flight. But all of them will be tested, and and if they're found to be positive, then they will obviously be quarantined and treated.
Sure. But Vishnu, again, if you could put this in perspective for us, because this is coming at a time when the government has, after 2 months, taken a decision that flights must restart. Domestic flights have restarted, and the Civil Aviation Minister even said that international flights, he thinks, may start by mid-July. So what is the system? How does it actually work? Do pilots, is this only Air India, or all airlines have their crew tested before they fly?
So, Sarah, there have been cases in the last few days, for starters, of passengers testing positive after having arrived on flights. At one level, this does feed into the concerns that air travel at this juncture, when COVID numbers, the absolute numbers are very large in India and growing, is perhaps not a good idea. On the other hand, you've got the government who feels that you cannot stop air travel indefinitely, and therefore there are certain risks which need to be taken, and by and large most people will be okay. But all airlines ensure that tests do actually take place for their passengers, for their crew members, before they actually operate flights. So therefore, on a daily basis, all of the airlines which are operating flights go through this huge routine whereby through central agencies which are identified, they go through these tests. And therefore, before the pilot or a crew member flies, the airline will know whether they're safe to fly or not safe to fly. But in the case of Air India, and I asked about the Air India numbers, and Air India, remember, is flying more than the other airlines at this stage, because they're also flying the Vande Bharat flights which are outside the country. There are 200 tests done in Delhi alone on a daily basis. And so there was a glaring mistake which was made. And I would say that, all's well that ends well, that there were no passengers over here, but obviously people would need to be a lot more careful than they are. I mean, I think nobody in the airline would dispute that.